Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Michelle, and today I'm going to be going over our group family subjects. So if you're new here, I have a 4-year-old son in preschool, a 7.5-year-old doing first, second grade level work, and my 11-year-old was in 5th grade this past year. And everything I planned for our group subjects this year, we did. We even added some in at the end and we finished some things up. So it went really well. So I'm going to get straight into it because I have a lot to talk about. So first I'm going to talk about what we did for history this year. So I wanted to do U.S. history this year, and I chose Oh Freedom, a conscious U.S. history curriculum. And we actually did both versions of this. We did the K through 2nd grade, which looks like this. We did a K through 2nd grade, which looks like that. And that was aimed at my younger daughter. And then my oldest, we did the 3rd through 7th, I believe, is what it is aimed for. And how I managed to do both is that how the 3rd through 7th curriculum works is every 6th week, you have the opportunity to dive deeper into one of the subject areas you covered. It has suggestions of different things you could look at. It was also, if you're behind on your reading, you could catch up. So for example, that's an example of a dig deeper. So it had that opportunity every 6 weeks. So what I would do when we hit that 6th week of where we could take a break or we could dive deeper in history, I would bring in the younger version, and it matches up perfectly with what units you're studying in the older version. And I would pick 3 to 4 picture books, and we'd do a picture book Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'd do a different picture book. As you can see here, it gives you different books, it gives you the objectives, different activities, and there's more pages that go with this as well. And it goes into each individual book, so discussion questions, activities, different craft-like things. And again, it aligns perfectly with what you're doing in the older, so it was a good review, but it was also something aimed at my younger child, because when we're going through a lot of these harder subjects, you know, it's not appropriate to be having craft time and things like that. I wanted to really focus on the difficult stories, the stories not being told in history, having those narratives brought, because this is my kid's first real big introduction into United States history. We will continue United States history next year as well, because I do not think it's possible to cover it, even in this age group, in 1 year. There's, you know, we're talking from the beginning to present time. That's a lot of history to cover. But I really, really enjoyed this curriculum, and I will definitely be using the United States history in high school. And I'm going to show you some of the spine books. So you go through a bunch of different books throughout the curriculum. One of the things I really loved about it is that every read aloud book, it was aimed for, you know, what we were learning specifically in that time period of history, and it was from the perspective of a child. So all the read aloud books were from, you know, I would say probably 10 to 14-year-olds. The main character, what their experience going through that particular period in time was. So I think it does an excellent job bringing in those narrative stories, because history is really stories. And these are the stories we're not told. There's a lot of things I didn't know in here, and I took lots of history classes in high school. I even took AP US history, and there's things in here I wasn't aware of. So I think it is very eye-opening. I think it's very age-appropriate. I have no issues talking about any of the things brought up in this curriculum. I think it does talk definitely on some harder subjects that if you watch previous reviews or update videos, I talk about how hard it is to talk about things like the Holocaust and slavery. But these are important conversations to have, and I think the materials provided really help facilitate those conversations. So the spine books, for at least the older one, the 3rd through 7th, Howard's Inn, absolutely love Howard's Inn. Again, you only read certain pages out of here at a time. It's not like you're reading multiple chapters at a time. A Different Mirror for young people, and an Indigenous People's History of the United States for young people. So you go through, these are kind of like giving you the context of what's going on at the time, and then you have other resources brought in. You have your read aloud that's bringing in that specific narrative voice. You also have multiple YouTube links that there's a playlist created so you can watch different documentaries or clips about specific things you're learning about. So I like that. And then there's an entire discussion-based thing. And that's, I think, my favorite thing about this curriculum is it's very much discussion-based. You're talking about the stories of groups of people, and especially since a lot of history is told from a very specific point of view in the United States, to have those different points of view I think is very important. I think my kids really benefited from that they're not in this bubble of that this is, how things are. No, this isn't how things are for everybody, and that's a really important distinction. Something else I really liked about it is for, slightly older children going through this. So my oldest, I had her reading this along with it, and it tells you in the notes how much to have your independent reader read. I think this matched perfectly with what we were learning. And again, it's written to the student, and it's very eye-opening. So we ended talking about 9/11. We did talk about some political movements past 9/11. But the big bulk of our last unit was 9/11, so we read the book Towers Falling. I'll insert a picture here. And it's about kids learning about the events of September 11th, 15 years after it happened. And one of the big themes of this book is, why is it important to learn history when it's in the past? Why is it important? How does it affect us now? And ultimately, I think it really brought the entire year together for this curriculum, because it talks about, I think a lot of people would assume that when you're talking about the more negative aspects of this country, that your children are going to walk away with this really negative opinion of the United States and be very unpatriotic. But what this curriculum does, and I think the Towers Falling really brings it together, is that learning about the foundational part of your country is important, and the stories and the people that surrounds is important. That, these are stories of Americans, and this is their country as well. And I think it just did a really good job talking about why history is important, why truthful history, hard history is important for kids. And these are the kids in the book asking these questions. So it really brought it full circle, and I think it was a wonderful introduction to United States history. And my kids really enjoyed it too. So next I'm going to talk about geography. So we did, because we're doing United States history, I brought in United States geography. And the main things we did for that was I picked up this junior state notebook, and it had it has in each section stickers. So it has the state tree, the state flower, the state bird. I had the kids draw a picture of it, and they wrote the capital city, the abbreviation, the date of statehood, the rank. I didn't make them write a famous person because 11 and 7, they don't know a lot of famous people. And then for the interesting fact, I just had them draw a picture, and we'd usually do 2 states at a time, so 2 states a week. Towards the end, I think we did end up doing 3 states just to finish it up before the end of the year. But they would fill out the information, we would go over it, and we would get that information from these 2 books. One of them was, I got at the library. It's an older resource, but it has, state capitals and things aren't changing much. So it had all that information in there. And then I brought the DK book, which was a little bit newer. Had some interesting information in it, but between those 2, we could fill out the entire book. Another thing we did with that is I had them working on their map work. So, for example, this was a section. We did it in sections. We used core knowledge, I believe it was geography of the United States. I'll put up a picture here. And we used that as the introduction to each different section of the United States. So the Northwest section, the Midwest section, all these were separated into different sections in core knowledge. So we'd read the core knowledge chapter, and then we'd go into the different states. So this was a specific area, and this was on a dry erase. And then I would have them, and these are just free printables I found online. I would just have them fill out when we finished that specific, so we were doing Southwest region, they would fill out where the states went, the abbreviations, just to get them familiar with where the states are. I'm not looking for mastery at this point at all. I'm looking for familiarity. The time will come when we have to master, United States maps and capitals and all those things. But right now it was an introduction, and it went very well with, when we were learning about in history. Another aspect we brought into geography to make it a little more fun, and again, help them relate things to states, not just where they are, but more information about the states, was this Eat Your Way Through the USA and Eat Your United States History homework. So we would do, every time we did a state, we would look at that specific state. So for example, this is Iowa. So it gives you it gives you an entree, a side, and then a dessert. And my kids really enjoyed the food facts, so we'd always read the food facts, and then we would decide, because we usually would do 2 states at a time, what 2 things we'd make. So most of the time we'd make a dessert. That was always a given. But then we would also make a dessert, or we would also make a side dish or an entree. Between those 2 states, we would decide what we would make. And it was fun. It really did make it a lot more interesting, I think. And one of them my kids really wanted to do, I think it was Maine, they wanted to do lobster. And I'm like, sorry, where we live, that's just not happening. Lobster is ridiculously expensive here. But they had a lot of fun tasting different things. And then we also did incorporate this while we were doing history as well. I know we made cherry pie. Yeah, we made the colonial cherry pie grunt. It goes a little bit into the history of that time period as well. So I think just bringing in some of that recipes made it a little more interesting, and they were good. All of them turned out really well. And we are, if you're unaware, a gluten-free family. My 7-year-old has celiac disease. I had no problem adapting the recipes to be gluten-free. Another aspect that we had for geography is I got this Scrambled States of America game. This was a lot of fun. We all really enjoyed this game, and we could all play it. Another game I got was Across America Flux. My kids weren't really a fan of this one. My oldest could play it pretty easily. My 7-year-old, but it was all right, but I wouldn't say it's ever a game we, pick for fun off the shelf. The Scrambled States was by far better, so if you had to pick one, I would definitely go with the Scrambled States. But that was geography, and we did that once a week. Like I said, went really well. History was Monday through Thursday. Next would be science. So we did core knowledge science, and I'm actually going to take you over to my computer because that's all online, completely free. I'm going to show you what units we covered this year. So for science, we've used core knowledge since the beginning when I brought my oldest home in 3rd grade. So this year we did 4th grade because previously last year we did an extended human body unit using all the core knowledge. You can see core knowledge for every grade level has a specific human body topic. So we took all of those and did an extended one in a previous year. So that kind of changed our schedule. So instead of doing 5th grade science this year, we finished up 4th grade that we hadn't finished in the previous year, which worked really well for both my kiddos. So we did energy transfer and transformation, investigating waves, structures and functions of living things, using natural resources for energy, processes that shape the earth. We did not do human respiration circulation because we covered it already when we did that human body unit. And one thing we did do when we finished this, because we finished these units before the end of the year, I brought in the core knowledge science, or I brought in the core knowledge computer units. So I believe we started at 1st grade. Yeah, so you can see starting here in 1st grade, they have different computer units. And it's just an introduction to how computers work, different apps, how word processing. And I did that because in middle school, I want my oldest to be able to do a Microsoft Office program to learn more about that. So I wanted both of them to have a more thorough introduction to how computers work and, processing and things like that. So we did 1st grade, 2nd grade computer units. We did codes and computers, and that's where we stopped, or we finished this one completely before hitting summer. So we will pick up next year with grade 5, and when we finish grade 5, we will finish up those other computer units. But like I said, everything went really well with Core Knowledge. I think it's an awesome resource, completely free online. We did a lot of demonstrations, experiments, nothing crazy material-wise that I had to pick up. The kids had an opportunity to do research reports, and obviously that looks different for my 11-year-old than my 7-year-old. My 7-year-old, we just answered the questions that the activity prompted us to. Well, my 11-year-old was able to do the research paper. She was able to do the outlining, and she was able to do the actual paper with pictures and turn it in. So being able to adapt it was really easy, but I've used Core Knowledge for years now, so it's not difficult for me in any way. Another thing we did is we looked at erosion, and they got to do some kind of problem-based learning. So they were given situations where the city council has approached you and they want to implement this, and what would your suggestions be? So one of the things they had to look at was, erosion of soil and the different ways you could help prevent that. So putting in trees, roots, foliage, putting in walls, and they got to experiment with that. And we had soil and rocks and a cardboard box, and they got to make layers of it, and we got to pour water in it to see what really helped prevent things like flooding. We, of course, made a solar oven and got to experiment with that. We learned about earthquakes, tsunamis, all of those natural disasters. They actually got to construct. They were, again, given this problem-based learning. They were given this problem of creating a structure, given certain materials, and they were given a budget. They couldn't go over this certain budget, and each toothpick cost this amount of money type thing, and I think it was toothpicks, marshmallows. And then we made a earthquake simulator using a box with some marbles in it. And they had to build the structure as high as they could without it collapsing when we simulated the earthquake. And that was actually a lot of fun. I don't think Core Knowledge gets a lot of credit because everyone's like, oh, it's so stuffy or it's public school. It's like, you really got to get into it and try it out to really get into the more fun aspects of those things. But it went really well. And even with, so this is one of the things the kids did. They made clay structures of the earth with the layers. One of the things we got into, what I said we did, the computer units, is they got to learn the different parts of computer, different processing bits, all that information. But the unit we just finished up, we were looking at digital footprints, so cookies, tracking devices, things like that. And one of the activities was, and they do have online activities you can do, so one of the things is they could make an avatar and they could create different things like that, or they had unplugged activities, which you don't need computer access to do. And sometimes we do the unplugged activities, sometimes we do the online, sometimes we do both, but this was one of them. It was an offline, and we did digital animal tracks, so they were given these different information about the animals. So for example, where they lived, their favorite photo, and I scattered these through the house, and they went on a hunt and they found them, and then they filled out this information. Given the information they found, the digital footprints left behind, what could they learn about this specific thing? And it's really talking about a lot of internet safety and why we don't share personal information on the internet and the consequences of that. So I thought that was really good, and also introduced my kids to Code.org and Scratch Junior, which my 7-year-old is absolutely loving. She loves coding now. We did do a Lego coding class this past year, and that kind of introduced them to coding, and this has really helped supplement their coding knowledge, and my 7-year-old would do it all day if I let her. So I think, again, Core Knowledge, awesome resource. Check it out if you haven't. Next, I'm going to talk about some of our smaller group subjects. So towards the end of the year, we did wrap up a couple subjects, which meant we had a spot open. Probably in about April, we wrapped up. I think we wrapped up social justice, which I'm going to talk about that in a minute. We wrapped that up, so that left a spot open in April and May, because we don't stop until the end of May, for us to put something else. So I did bring in art. We do plan on doing art. I'll link up above our summer plans. But we do have a bunch of these Harcourt art books, and we have them, first, second, third, fourth grade, all that. So I brought this out in the last couple, the last 2 months before summer. And we did some of the projects. And again, I think it's laid out really well, easy to implement. This was grade 4, if I believe correctly. So we did some portraits, and they did some abstract art. One of the portraits they just did this past week is they had to draw someone they knew. This is my sister-in-law. She is soon to have her baby, if you can't tell from this picture. So we did have the opportunity to add things. That's right, we didn't take things away. We didn't drop a bunch of stuff. We added things towards the end of the year because when you have a schedule and you stick to that schedule, you finish things on time and it allows you the opportunity to explore different areas. So we did do some art. We did philosophy. We did this once a week on Fridays. My kids really enjoyed this. And it's funny because my 7-year-old is very much in that concrete thinking right now. My 11-year-old is more exploring the gray area of things. We had some really good conversations. One of them was, is the concept of time a man-made concept? Does time exist outside of our own consciousness? And that was a really good conversation. My 11-year-old had the thought process that obviously time exists outside of humans' consciousness because plants can sense time and those aren't necessarily conscious things. And my 7-year-old's like, well, no, time doesn't exist outside of our concepts because if we're not here, it's that tree falling. If you don't see it, it doesn't happen. And then we also had the idea of, the Big Bang and what happened prior to that. Was there existence prior to that and was there not? So it really got into some good philosophical conversations, which I think this is a great age to be talking about those things with the kids. So on to social justice now. So social justice is always a core subject in our house. It's something we always do as a family. So this past year we did Mint and Bloom's Power of the People, and this is the spine book that goes with it, and it's every letter stands for a different movement or group or part of the history. And it does have video links within the curriculum, discussion questions, all of that, some comprehension questions as well. Some of the things my kids really enjoyed. I've talked about this in update videos as well if you want to check those out and kind of see how it went throughout the year. So my 7-year-old really enjoyed the coloring pages that came with all that. And then there was a bunch of different activities. Every single letter you did, there was a specific activity. So for example, we were learning about the Black Panther movement. And one of the things they did was provide free food to large groups of children. And one of the activities is they had to design a fridge. So kind of like the libraries you see, the free libraries you see with books for kids, it's a free fridge that has food for people. So what pantry items and things like that, and they got to design their own, what they would put in a food pantry, a free food pantry that was open to everybody. Another thing we talked about is Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers and how they created a flag to represent that, and they got to create a flag to represent a movement that was important to them. Of course, my 11-year-old made one about conservation, helping animals, saving the planet. Another thing we did is we did the Stonewall riots, and they got to talk about the 3-item rule that this law was put in place, that you had to have at least 3 items of clothing if you were to be served or in a public area. So they got to design what 3 items of clothing they would have their people wear. And again, you're covering a variety of topics, things in history, specific people, movements. I thought it was really well, and it was a lot of things, again, that I have never come across as an adult, so it was really eye-opening to see, and I think it went really well with history as well. So something that, we finished that up again in April, so that left room to add something else for the last 2 months. And what I did end up doing was bringing back Little Justice Leaders. And this is a social justice themed subscription box aimed at kids, K through 5th, I believe. And again, not sponsored, not affiliated. I do share unboxings of these, but that's just because I absolutely love this program. So I did adoption, and then the most recent one, I believe, was how to build a better world. So it comes with a bunch of different cards to learn more about the information, and I've talked about these in those videos, so watch those unboxing videos if you want to see more. But one of the things I do want to highlight about this company that I absolutely love, in our recent box, it came with some air dry clay, which is great. But again, my 7-year-old has celiac disease, and I have found, unfortunately, a lot of clay products have wheat or gluten in them. And yes, she's not eating the clay, but we do try to limit her exposure to it, especially with her hands and eating. It's safer just not to have gluten products in her house. So I contacted the company and I said, hey, do you by chance know what brand these are or if they're gluten-free? I explained that my youngest daughter has celiac disease and we try to avoid those things. And she responds in a few days saying that unfortunately they couldn't tell if they had gluten. They gave me the brand name, but they said not to worry about it because they were Amazoning me some gluten-free clay that she could use. So within a couple days, we got I think there was a few little packs of this in the box. They gave us an entire box of multicolored clay that was gluten-free that she could use because they want this program to be inclusive to everybody. And I think that really speaks volumes to the people running this Little Justice Leaders and what they stand for. So yes, are the boxes $49? Are they more expensive? But absolutely, I will give you my money if these are the values you stand for. So I absolutely love their boxes. So another thing we did, again, towards the end of the year, when we had some areas, we finished geography, we finished social justice, that moved in room for other things. So like I said, we brought in art. We also brought in music, and we used Carnegie Hall, and I'll take you to my computer to show you how we utilize that. So, like I said, April and May, we were able to utilize this program. We did finish Program 1 and Program 2, and it was really well, and it fit in. Program 1 actually fit in really well to our freedom songs that we were talking both in social justice and in history. So I really like this program. It gives you a video introduction of the artist. You sing different songs, learn things like melody, and there's always different activities you can do as well. So as you can see here, it does give you everything you need. It also gives you different ideas of activities to do. So for this one, it was find household items to make instruments. But my kids really enjoyed it. So for example, one of the things they got to do was write their own repeating lyrics, and this goes with what we were learning and the rhythm and everything, so they got to do that. Another one is we were talking about freedom songs and different things like that, so they got to make different protest signs. So Carnegie Hall, great thing. We will continue to use that during summer because that will be our music. And the other thing we did this year, December, we did do a December we did do a specific study. Every December I do a specific unit study. So this year we did Santa Claus. We looked at the different incarnations of Santa, Sinterklaas, and we did different activities. I'll link that video up above if you kind of want to see what we specifically did for that. But it was a lot of fun, and the kids really enjoyed it and the activities, and it was very festive for the season. On top of that, we did have our co-op this year, and that's a co-op that I and another mom run. We get together and we figure out all these different things we're going to do for the kids. So this year we have covered art in our co-op, poetry tea time, nature study. We did some Generation Genius science experiments together as a group. We did PE, and then we did some different parties throughout the years, because that's honestly the only thing I really miss about public school was the classroom parties. So we had a St. Patrick's Day party, we had a Valentine's party. We got together during winter and made gingerbread houses. During fall, we went to the pumpkin patch. So we do get to do all these different fun activities as a group. I would say the only downside is my oldest is the oldest in the group. It is a lot of younger kids in the group because it's a lot of people testing out the waters of homeschooling. And in my experience and in my area, a lot of homeschoolers send their kids back to public or private school in middle school and high school. So finding kids in her age range has definitely been one of the struggles of this year, but we still have some good friends, even if they're younger than us, in our co-op. And it's been a really fun year. So that is everything we have done for group subjects this past year, and it seems like a lot. But again, if you look at any of my scheduling videos, it's sectioned out that, if you stay on track, you are consistent, you can accomplish a lot of things and have a great and fun year. So if you have any specific questions about anything I showed you, leave them in the comments below. If you'd like to know more about something I showed you, I can definitely do that. There's definitely curriculum in here I would love to just, make a whole video on, but to condense this one, I can only do a quick overview. But if you have any suggestions, questions, anything you want to know, leave in the comments below. If not, thank you for watching.